now and say hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's speaker series. We have Tyler Ray here tonight, who is the Chief Rockhound Chief of the Granite Outdoor Alliance, and we will turn over the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Leah. Very much appreciated. As Leah mentioned, I'm Tyler Ray with Granite Outdoor Alliance, and I'd love to tell you a little bit about Granite Outdoor, but first I'm going to play you a video, and we're going to see how that goes. So I'll be right back. Okay, so that was a little video introduction to Granite Outdoor Alliance and what it's all about. And for folks who just joined, I'm Tyler Ray, Rockhound Chief of Granite Outdoor Alliance, and very thankful to be here. Thank you, Leah, for inviting me and the Ray Cultural Center. I was joking with some folks, no relation. My last name is Ray. It's spelled a little different, but hopefully I can carry the same legacy over time that is represented in the Ray Cultural Center. But it's a great historical place, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you. As I give this talk tonight, I want to put up a PowerPoint so we have some visual aids to follow along with. I think that's often helpful, particularly with this topic of the outdoor economy and what it means to New Hampshire. Oftentimes people are like, "What are you talking about?" Because although it's something that is very much part probably of all of our lives here tonight, it is also something that is emerging in the economic sector. Recently, there's been economic data collected starting in 2017, so it's very much a new economic sector. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is what that means for folks in New Hampshire and what it means for driving toward our future and creating sustainable options that make a more productive and healthy environment. So what I'm going to do first here is pull up a screen. Hang on one second. Okay, I think we're here. All right. So all right, sorry about that. Now we're up. I can see it. Okay, so again, I'll just reflect upon what I was just saying, that the purpose of this talk is really for me, and what I'm bringing to the table is really to bring awareness to the issues facing the New Hampshire outdoor industry. We call it the great outdoors, but it's what can we do about it collectively? And it's really an important conversation, and that's why I'm just happy that everyone's here tonight to have this conversation. So Granite Outdoor Alliance It is a newly formed nonprofit, 501c3. It's a membership-based advocacy group. And I'm sitting here at my office in North Conway. And so that's where I am located, just on the eastern side of the Whites in Mount Washington. And but this is a statewide organization, and we very much need collective action from not only businesses and organizations, but individuals as well. And that's the important component tonight, is that it's reflecting the outdoor industry. Pumped or stuffed? So I grew up just over the border in Maine, and I played basketball for quite a while. My high school basketball coach would always say, whenever someone screwed up or did something, made a mental mistake, he'd say, "Hey, what is the ball? Is this pumped or stuffed?" Yeah. He's often emphasizing his point by, give it a fake pass at you, always take a few steps back, right? And yeah, you kind of realized, you probably look like a deer in the headlights, but his point was always, hey, it's time to pay attention. Details matter. And don't be distracted or fooled by the actions of others. You control your own destiny. So listen up and pay attention. So guess what? That's our world today, frankly, right here, right now. We, with such, prevalent issues as screen time, obesity, housing issues, broadband, childcare, low wages. Of course, I didn't even mention the fact that we're in a pandemic. What are we going to do? Are these bike wheels, as in the picture, are they pumped or stuffed? How about our economy? I think we all just, maybe we all just took a couple steps back there, right, with the fake pass. But, it's the reality that we're facing right now. And historically, towns like, Waterville Valley have very much focused on tourism. And why not, right? Small area and supports small businesses, invites visitors to the experience that you all get to share, the wonders of the area, and that all makes sense. But what's never really considered in that discussion is what happens, when tourism is very successful, too successful, right? And all of a sudden we develop issues that we didn't anticipate, such as massive saturation of folks, whether it's visitors and locals alike, and creating negative experiences. And having, locals have issues, with that change in environments, and it creates an unsettling time. So speaking of the pandemic, there's very much a silver lining here, which is that opportunity for the outdoor community to rise up and offer its collective voice to steward its own future. It's a very important topic. And really, Granite Outdoors' perspective here is that now is the time to band together and recalibrate toward a responsible outdoor economy. It's something that's probably, when you think about it, it's very much long overdue. And what that means is developing a community-minded policy agenda set around fundamental core values that supports a productive industry growth, responsible recreation, healthy communities, and the protection of public lands, which is paramount. So the time is now to protect and preserve the places that we live, work, and play toward creating a sustainable future. And so this is very much a movement, and it takes folks like yourself to make it happen. So the outdoor economy is huge. It's very, very huge. I mentioned that there's some numbers, even in New Hampshire, you saw the video. But it's an industry that's deeply rooted in New Hampshire. I also mentioned that it's something that's been around for a very long time. It's just not always thought of as an economic sector. It's always thought of as like something we do on the side or on vacation, or, going to a state park and, kicking or punting the volleyball around or whatever you do, and so it's taken on a new meaning. And many think of the outdoors in terms of tourism, as I already mentioned, which really is no surprise. I mean, the White Mountain National Forest, which you are surrounded by, is, the most highly trafficked national forest in the United States, 6 million annual visitors. And, there's a good reason for that. The outdoor industry is very much made up of small and medium-sized companies, and they include the coffee you buy on the way to the trailhead, or the beer that you grab after a ski day, as well as the gear you use, and the workers who are located in the areas like where you live, because they have decided to work and play is an important lifestyle choice. So so to summarize that, the outdoor economy really is the economic activity that is made and spent around these outdoor pursuits. And I always like to tell people it's a better way to say that is it's a way of life. It's probably how you live your life. Things revolve around recreating in the outdoors. And the important impact nationally is that the outdoor industry it contributes 2.1% to the overall GDP of the U.S. Economy, and it's now emerging as a critical element to the economic recovery from the pandemic, and it's bigger than both mining and agriculture. I mean, these are massive industries, and 788 billion is the price tag, or the value, rather, is a better way to say that. And here in New Hampshire, one of the biggest takeaways is that it's one of New Hampshire's largest industries. But currently there's no industry leadership and consequently no representative voice for the outdoor industry. So how could that be, right? Here we are in a state that very much values its outdoors, but the state has struggled to understand how to utilize its natural resources. It's sort of the classic double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's blessed with these storied landscapes and generations of attracting visitors, but then on the other hand, it wrestles with this legacy of overuse and land speculation and logging and mill type industries. But currently, as you'll see in this graphic here, there's 3.2% of the New Hampshire's economy is the outdoor sector, but that's the 9th highest in the country. That is on par with Colorado, which is like one of the leaders in the outdoor space. However, New Hampshire ranks second to last for reinvestment based on this percentage. So, you want to think about, I'm sure the discussion will come up here at some point tonight. Why are your trailheads so packed? Why are they so crowded? What are the issues going on? Well, just to put it in perspective, that the trailhead that you're probably talking about was probably built in 1948, and guess what? Time has passed since then, and there really has not been any innovation or reflection or infrastructural development in that space. And so, that's an important part of our discussion that I want you to think about, that a lot of what we look at for infrastructure has been around a very long time, and it hasn't kept up pace with modern behavior. So the other thing I want to point out while we're on this slide here is that, the New Hampshire outdoor economy is very fragmented as well. So, the state has been very good with its regionalization of the state. When you think of New Hampshire, what do you think of? You think of maybe the White Mountains, the Seacoast, the North Country, the Lakes region area, but you don't think about New Hampshire, right? When you think about Vermont or Maine, you think about Vermont and Maine. And so it's an interesting branding exercise when you put it into perspective. And so, that's sort of illustrative of one of the issues here that we're talking about, is that, despite the fact that there's this own ecosystem of the outdoor economy and all the players that are within it, there's no mobilization, there's no collaboration evident across these different regions, at least to a level that could impact policymaking. So one of the first efforts of Granite Outdoor Alliance is really to unite the outdoor community. GOA was put together by a coalition of outdoor businesses and trail organizations and outdoor enthusiasts, and that is really goal number one: is how do we find and create this network impact? Because that's how things happen. It's just like when we think about trail work, many hands make light work. It's the same sort of concept. It's network impact, it's consensus building. And so it's a really important first step in mobilizing industry. I mean, really what we're talking about here is a grassroots effort to mobilize the outdoor companies and what makes up that. And how do we do that? It's you look around and you see other associations, other say trade groups, and how have they developed? They've been around for so long that it's very rare to see an opportunity for a new economic sector to just jump in into the mix. And that's really what we have here with the outdoor industry. And, the goals here is to, as I mentioned, is to create this unified voice so the industry has a seat at the table when there is policy discussions and other considerations. And, one way to think about that is, how should we recognize and support trails and other infrastructure in the same way that we view roads and bridges, right? I mean, when you think about it, when you're out in the trails and you're or accessing different areas, in many ways, it's very much the same. It's part of your way of life, and just like driving on the road and the bridges and all of that. So but it's not deemed the same in economic terms. And so, another thought is that's maybe a little bit more relevant is how we behave on public lands, and how we treat these wild places. And I'm certain that that's an issue in Waterville Valley. So, very much like the organization 1% for the Planet, Granite Outdoors leading the movement in New Hampshire for responsible business growth, to take responsibility for that growth and to do it in a way that makes sense and is smart. And why would a company join 1% for the Planet, which does have an environmental initiative? It's because they care. They have soul. They want to help drive a positive future. So it's the same commitment that we're asking from folks like yourself and businesses, is to think about your children, think about future generations, think about the lands that you play and recreate on, and what happens when those aren't there, or they're degraded to an extent that they aren't the same. And then when we think about bringing businesses involved, that's a very strategic way to drive policies. You drive it through businesses. You take some companies in New Hampshire, for example, Nemo Equipment, for example, they build tents in Dover, or AMC, is another example. How many tents is Nemo going to sell when the outdoors is just absolutely trashed and no one is hanging out? No one is going out there. The trails are a mess. Maybe there aren't trails anymore. Who knows? So there's a vested interest there. AMC, if there's not, any sort of commitment to maintenance or working in the outdoors, then what business do they have? So there's a vested interest in New Hampshire companies to take part and take a role in driving policy that is responsible. So stewarding the industry's future is imperative. And it starts with taking this leap, really, and charging forward with a grassroots effort to build our community. And that includes everyone that is part of the ecosystem and everyone here. And those people, I'm failing to mention here what's on the screen here, and really to think about it is, brand, products and services, manufacturers, trail organizations, entrepreneurs, individuals. And then I want to talk about the sectors as well. So just to highlight who we're talking about, there's gear and equipment, retailers, guides and tours, health and fitness, outdoor activities, trail orgs, and so forth, stewardship and education initiatives, government and land managers, races, adventure races, that kind of stuff, media, freelancers, gig economy related type folks, professional athletes. But then you also have you have an expanded view as well. You have companies that, well, let me just push forward here and say, these are just like a sampling of some of our current members. And so you have companies like White Mountain Puzzles, for example, that you're like, well, that's maybe not an outdoor company. Well, guess what? That company very much values the outdoors. It's why they're located in Jackson, New Hampshire, and why employees go to work for White Mountain Puzzles, and why the ownership decides to stay there, because they have this way of life, this outdoor lifestyle, the trail amenities. These are things that are incredibly important to maintaining this industry and being in these places. And so, you look at these variety of companies, you could say that they're all from different sectors, and guess what? They are. And that's what's so interesting about the outdoor industry, is that it's really, it's a collaboration of different industries, and that's what makes it so unique. Everyone from Revision Energy, which is solar, paneling and equipment and manufacturing. You have UNH, Nemo, I mentioned, AMC, Northern Forest Center, Ski La White, retail. You have all these great companies, and they represent different aspects of the outdoor industry. And as I said, sometimes they're not even in the outdoor industry, but the people who work there and drive them are. And that's an important takeaway. So why is all this important? And that's sort of repeating myself probably here, but it's important to do that. It's to create a sustainable outdoor economy. So what, Tyler, you mentioned that like 6 times. You said sustainable. What does that really mean? Well, besides just being here for a long time and being enduring and lasting, there's some components to that which makes things sustainable. And that is, these come into the policy pillars of the organization. So what they really are is economic development, which is really supporting businesses to have the ability to responsibly grow and be an active member of the community. This is not an organization that believes in, say, preservation. Not to say it doesn't believe in it, and there's a time and a place for it all, but there's economic development is part of the plan to go forward. It's an important distinction, because I think often in the environmental and social space, there's discussion about, very much limiting that. Well, no one's saying that you need to limit economic development. Like we want to create bigger networks and do things in a way that makes sense with infrastructure. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about that in a second. So I'm not going to go too deep. Conservation and stewardship, these are important. And we'll take a deeper dive here. So education, workforce, health, and wellness. So these are the 4 pillars of the organization. So now I'm going to chat about them individually here for a minute. So economic development. So, again, going back to the concept of creating opportunities to grow the economy in ways that reflect the characteristics of the state and maybe the regions that which they're in is really an important component. This is just a huge component of what we're talking about. An example of what economic development is in this space is, I like to use the analogy all the time of, in the nonprofit world, it's like, how many bake sales does it take, to have a to accomplish an objective that organization has. And that's how the nonprofit world is basically designed. There's very limited, there's certainly money in that space, but there's very limited access and bandwidth to utilize these funds and do good with them. So people are, volunteers, and I'm sure many of you on the call here are very similar in that, you have you're very much restricted in what you can do in that nonprofit space. So what we want to say with economic development is, in the outdoor space, is working on creating access and infrastructure, improving those parking lots that were built in 1948. That's a really big, important part of this. Networking, getting to know, who is your colleagues, who are your counterparts within the state. Big part of this, how do we cultivate and capture wealth within the state? Collaboration is another element of that. Over in Maine, there's a great example in Maine is there's a counterpart organization, Maine Outdoor Brands, and they, through a series of events that they had, the folks at LL Bean met up with a startup called Flowfold, and Flowfold makes like bags and wallets and smaller type items that are kind of using cool materials that are trending and attractive. And so because of the networking, they developed a product collaboration, and now Flowfold is in LL Bean catalogs, which are, as we all know, they're probably the biggest catalog company out there. And boom, Flowfold's on the map. And that's a way to support business, is through this collaboration. I think that's a great example. Supply chain issues, we think about when the pandemic hit and masks and gowns and all of that, like, where were people sourcing this information from? What if we had this outdoor, what if we had a better opportunity knowing who the players are that are these manufacturing apparel companies, even, Virgin Outdoor and Lincoln, Ragged Mountain Equipment, in Intervale, if they had abilities to trade or collaborate to purchase, to increase their purchasing power, that would have been better off for the citizens around us. So supply chain stuff is very interesting. I think what we're going to see very soon, coming this spring, is a very big problem in the supply chain for the world of bicycles. Bicycles are very limited, and it's going to be a problem. And these smaller retailers don't have access to bikes and supplies like the bigger guys do. So how does a rising tide float all boats in that type of world? It's difficult. So, one of the things that we'd really like to do is to develop um, an online, I call it an online hub, and that is really going to be something that's reflective of the outdoor industry online. We're all probably, Leah and I were talking earlier, a little tired, of these Zoom calls and whatnot. But the reality is that's just our world, right? We live online to do business, and that's okay. It's a moderation and reasonability is an important part of that. But if we could, eliminate the need to cross borders or do other things, and we can cultivate business online through through innovative ways to capture people's attention and do business in a specific location online, and why not try that? It's a really awesome thing. What if you had, again, I'll use the Nemo equipment conversation. What if Nemo's using, pictures from Colorado and Texas and Alaska, when we say, hey, Nemo, how about using some New Hampshire pictures? And they say, well, we don't really have any. And by the way, this is not a real conversation. This is an example. But the thought is, well, what if we had, say, a content page on this hub where all local freelancer photographers had samples of their work, and then Nemo could go in and pick and choose, and then all of a sudden there's a relationship's been formed, and that's how we support from within, and that's capturing local wealth and retaining it within, and that is how. And what we're talking about when we think about economic development, there could be, we have high seasonality issues in New Hampshire based on the outdoor industry. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But what if on this hub we had a work share program where workers were needing hours or looking for off-season employment? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to retain those employees here in New Hampshire and not have them take off and go out west or do something else simply because there's not job opportunities here? So, the list, I could go on and on about the opportunities with an online hub in this space, but I think you kind of get the point. So, and then I'll just make one final thought on economic development. It's attracting business, outdoor businesses. When you think about the traditional outdoor companies, they're really quite limited. You have the Timberlands and the Nemos, which I mentioned, but comparatively to our neighboring states, we just don't have as many. So it's, how do we attract more entrepreneurs? And, that's how we have to work with the state office to build that and make New Hampshire's, it's a fascinating place. You have the seacoast to the tip of Mount Washington. You have it all here, and it's very accessible and almost to a fault, right? Because we very much have transiency type issues, but we can turn that around and turn it to our advantage. So land conservation and stewardship, this is an important, everything's important, right? But land conservation, we think about how, if we don't have, I mentioned this earlier, but if we don't focus on land and water, then what in the outdoor industry, what do we have? Everything we do is on land and water. So it sounds very simple, and I know there's plenty of land trusts and that type of work that's going on across the state, and that's awesome and wonderful. But it's an important reminder that industry needs to be supported, because land conservation is huge. Now, when we talk about climate issues and retaining the forest lands and helping that out, there becomes a lot more importance into land conservation. And it's really cool to have these public-private partnerships with different organizations and government, and you could have multi-resource and recreation happening in the same place. There could be timber extraction at the same time there's recreation, and and that's something that's interesting to think about, and how that would go about, and the relationships that could result from that. Um, so, and then I just want to say also that we have for stewardship, I have this, you see this up here, Ski Kind, and that's an example of homegrown grassroots stewardship initiatives. And this is a backcountry ski code of conduct that we developed and worked. We came up with this idea. We pitched it to Winter Wildlands Alliance, which is a national nonprofit. And it has these several components. And if you're interested, you can check out skikind.org. And ski aware, ski responsible, ski no trace, because of this surge in uphilling, which you're seeing at Waterville Valley. I talked to Tim Smith a few weeks ago, and we very much talked about the opportunities in Waterville Valley, but there's an educational part too, because you have so many newcomers coming into the sport. Just because you're an expert skier and you've been doing it for 40 years doesn't mean you know anything about backcountry skiing. You could probably ski, but there's a lot of other risks that are part of the sport that are not there in the alpine skiing. So just an example. What you'll probably hear coming pretty soon is this relationship that we've worked with the tourism office, Visit NH, and that is about Leave No Trace partnership. So New Hampshire is going to be the second state in the East Coast to secure a partnership with Leave No Trace. We're right there, part of that deal, and it's pretty exciting because these are the things that are going to not only or not necessarily reduce traffic at those trailheads that I was talking about, but at minimum, education is really important in terms of these newcomers that are coming to the outdoors, what the etiquette is, and how to tackle those problems that we've all been seeing. And so that's an important initiative. So the third pillar is workforce and education. As I mentioned, there are issues, and I know that you're seeing this in Waterville Valley. Where are the workers? They aren't here. We see that in the North Country and the Lakes region areas. Where are the workers? So it's a problem. And, you have this, I talked at the outset of this about the success of, the outdoor industry in New Hampshire. But when we really boil it down, we think about it, how productive is the outdoor industry when we have high seasonality, which means people are leaving, or it costs employers a lot to train them, and then they leave. So that's an opportunity cost issue going on there. You have low wages, which are sort of inherent in the industry, unlike other industries. So how do we get wages up? Do we work with the university system, the Granite State College, the Plymouth States, and we put together a package that has different pathways, whether you're an adult, going to Granite State, or an undergrad at Plymouth? And do we connect those to the business? Do we connect those graduates to the businesses within the different regions? A lot of opportunity to figure something out there, and also to become innovative and entrepreneurial, to think about how do we support new businesses coming in this space, and really, really push the workforce, because that is a big part of it. Now, something that's sort of the elephant in the room on this issue is housing, right? Because that's really the biggest issue. We would probably have workers in all these areas if they had a place to live. So we have a really big housing problem, and there are many housing coalitions around the state that are helping tackle these issues, and we are in full support of that. It's very much a local issue based on zoning, but the way many New Hampshire municipalities are zoned are not favorable to younger families moving into areas to work, and it's very expensive. So if you're making $12 an hour as a snowmaker at Wildcat, that's probably not that's not supporting or sustainable, and that's a tough thing to swallow. So how do we? That's a problem, right? It's a very big problem. So there's a number of issues there that are listed. Wages, entrepreneurs, skills and training, trail amenities, and it's really thinking about that conversation and working with the various players that are in the spaces to try to improve that situation. And then finally, I'll just touch on briefly health and wellness. I think something that you'll start to see over the next 5 years in the healthcare world is, this and you see it already now. There, you see an occasional article in the New York Times about, forest bathing and things that we kind of chuckle about a little bit, but it's stuff that we do. I know I had a stressful day. I'm like, I need to go for a run. I need to blow off some steam, right? And I come home and that was pretty helpful. I just cleared my head. I think we'll start seeing doctors writing prescriptions that are not for pills. They are for going for walks and getting outside. And that's something that's real. And it's something that folks listening here, it's something you need to get behind, because we want healthy communities, healthy people. When we think about things like infrastructure, improving how people can get outdoors, not necessarily in crowded ways, we think about, healthier minds. We think about reductions in crime because people actually have something to go do. If they can go, split boarding or snowboarding at Waterville, then, that's good for them. Alternative activities are going to be very important. So the social benefits are big here on the health and wellness side. And I'm just sort of scratching the surface, but the opportunities are big. And it also, that impacts the workforce issues, because, healthcare plans are very expensive for employers. So let's think about collaborative issues in that space, so that we can have either one employer sponsor other employers, and there's a cost sharing program going on. I think this is something that the insurance companies and so forth really need to tackle, because it's a problem. Everything's very expensive. Everything we talked about so far is very expensive, and that is an issue. So, ultimately, we want New Hampshire to be a welcoming place, right? That's kind of the big picture here, and something that supports this outdoor lifestyle. And it's not necessarily just a place to visit, but to live, and to live well, right? That's an important part of this. And, things that we're pushing at Granite Outdoor are supportive of this. It's some simple things like events and networking, which, every group does that. But guess what? It's because it's an effective old school approach to building a community. That's why communities like Waterville Valley have events that go on at Town Square and things like that. People are getting to know each other. They're happy to see each other. And these are things that we can apply to these different spaces. We can learn from the different industries that are part of the outdoor industry to make it better. From a policy and advocacy perspective, that's really important. I've touched on a lot of that tonight. Where we're looking to work with the outdoor director that's going to be coming in, and I'm actually on the hiring committee for that with the state, and I'm pretty excited about that, because it's an opportunity to bring someone in on the government level that's going to help make some change. So that's really an important piece. Other things I've talked about: professional development, media collaboration. These are all things that feel wide ranging, and they are, but they're all things that we can tackle, and do it together collectively. So in year one, the work that I'm doing with Granite Outdoors in year one is to develop that network impact. It's to build consensus. And so I ask every one of you, if you have a business that you work with, or folks that or even ask yourself, would I support this initiative? I hope you would. And so I'd like you to consider doing that, whether it's, asking your employer or having the discussion, what are some of the future plans for us? How are we going to maintain our workforce? How are we going to make our business attractive to workers? These are things that all interrelate, and the answer might be trail amenities, mountain bike trails, what have you. So they all sort of interrelate: economic development, workforce, and so forth. Also, year one, working with the outdoor director, that's going to be important development. And then finally, working with the different regions on understanding what the problems are and issues are in those areas, and coming up with some solutions, and trying to develop an online, tackle that with an online hub. How can we do that and build industry online from folks that aren't neighbors? So, it's the opportunity right now to mobilize in the right direction forward. And, I don't think we have to ask whether it's pumped or stuffed. I think we know the answer. It's time to take action and to do it for the long haul. So it is time to raise your voice. And I think that's one of the biggest issues holding the outdoor industry back is that no one really pats himself on the back or toots their horn, but there's a time that we need to do that, and we need to celebrate change, and that's what we're talking about tonight. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to end the slideshow here, but I'd love to take some questions if there are any, and see what anyone out there has to say. So I see. So I see a question here from Cheryl. Tyler, have you seen good models in other states where they've been able to work collectively to build and support the outdoor industry? Well, in fact, there's a wonderful example next door in a neighboring state, Vermont. So the governor, Phil Scott, just announced a $22 million outdoor recreation infrastructure package, which is it's like mind-blowing awesomeness, very, very next level thinking. And what it incorporates is the monies are broken out to do everything from focus on infrastructure, focus on communities that are not only working with infrastructure but workforce related, and they have the monies divvied out in a bunch of different ways. So there are certainly examples. You have in Maine. I like using these examples of our neighbors because hopefully that gets you a little fired up, because it's like, why aren't we doing this? So in Maine they have a license plate initiative. So it's called the Adventure Plate, and some of the funding that will go to that will fund workforce and entrepreneurial initiatives. And so that's a really exciting, innovative approach to, trying to expand and build the workforce. They're also doing a number of stewardship initiatives in Maine, in, sort of this, recreate responsibly. That's not their program, but very similar type things, but to support the businesses while you're outdoors. So there's a lot of stewardship initiatives happening there as well. So, yeah, so that's an answer to that question. Did I see another hand up?
Yeah, so the way it works, everybody is muted. So if you raise your hand, we'll try and acknowledge you, or use the chat button there. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Michelle, if you are able. There we go. Go ahead.
Tyler, thank you very much. This was a great presentation. I mean, you were very knowledgeable and enthused, and it was really fun to hear, because I've been in the nonprofit sector for a long time, and it feels like you have it. I really commend you. Today I was reading an article from Lampum's Quarterly. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a great journal.
Okay.
And you know it?
I've seen it. Yes, I do not have. It does not come to my doorstep, but
well, in it is a short essay by Walt Whitman, in where he actually confirms the importance of nature, the element of nature forming a part of our whole psyche that is very, very important for democracy. I mean, it was an interesting thing. Can I just read you a little bit?
Yeah. No, this is great. This is like hitting the nail on the head here. I love it when you.
Well, I mean, for me, that he related
arguments.
that he related democracy with nature. We cannot have grand races of mechanics, work people, and commonality, the only specific purpose of America, on any less terms. I conceive of no flourishing and heroic elements of democracy in the United States, or of democracy maintaining itself at all, without the nature elements forming a main part, to be its health element and beauty element, to really underlie the whole politics, sanity, religion, and art of the new world. He wrote that in 1882.
So some things are timeless, and
yeah,
it's very much a statement that I'm so glad you just brought that up. It's so much a statement that reflects, our modern times. And, at the end of the day, if we can't, manage our backyard, so to speak, what can we do, right? And we're being overtaken by technology and what's more efficient, and we're losing that human element. But we see it in so many different ways. We see it in the whole climate discussion, the single plastics issues, it's like, what are we doing, right? And we have these opportunities now to jump in front of that. And I don't think it's jumping in front of a bus. I think it's running alongside it and saying, hey, let's maybe take this track over here. And
Well, COVID,
go ahead.
COVID has certainly given us pause.
Well, it's, I like to say too, it's like, when COVID hit, right, it was we had April and May that was like dormant, right? Everything was shut down. And so everyone's kicking and screaming, we need to get the economy back. And then, guess what? All of a sudden it came roaring back in terms of, or at least in New Hampshire, everyone came to New Hampshire and we have overcrowding issues. And so it's like, well, which way do you want it, right? And so that's what we're arguing, is that you don't need to go one way or the other. There is a balance, and it's all about finding that balance. It's interesting to think about. This morning I had a conversation with Clean Energy New Hampshire, and we were just like marveling over the alignment with the two organizations. And they call it the clean energy economy, we call it the outdoor economy, but we're talking about the same thing. And that's how we're it's like, well, let's collaborate and go forward in this way. And it's exciting that there's other groups out there that are focused on this. I think a big issue is succession. I think that's a big part of what we're dealing with. There's folks that are holding on to positions of power across the state, municipalities, selectmen, planning boards. And, it's frankly, there's a time where you got to pass the torch off. And, if that doesn't happen, then your policies are going to be, they plateaued 30 years ago, and that's where you are. And so change can't happen. People can't break. Younger and infusions of new energy and thought are being chilled and restricted from coming into the public conversation because there isn't that succession happening. And so, I think that's a real issue for us. You look at a lot of the zoning codes that are around with, expansive occupancy and the density issues, when, why are we encouraging all of this sprawl? And, and there needs to be, different types of housing options. And that, I think that's actually I actually think that's one of our biggest problems, is because guess what? Now there's no place for folks to live. So where I live in the Mount Washington Valley, there are currently 4 major hotels. When I say major, I think they're all 4 are 100+ rooms, like either proposed, planned, or under production development. And it's like, how is this possible? There's no workers. I have a private law practice as well, so I have many clients that they don't have workers, and they're suffering, and they're closing doors. And how can we bring in these new giant hotels that are not, there's no guidelines for, green guidelines that we built to begin with. And they think that there's going to be employees to staff, and maybe they will, but then that means someone else is going to suffer and close doors. So it's a really challenging time. And we really need folks to, show up for their community.
Yeah. No kidding. Well, thank you so much. It is, again, kind of as my mother Michelle was saying, that these are repeated themes, and so it's great to see people coming together. A lot of us have heard about it, and our parents have heard about it. And if you've been involved in environmental policies or activities, it's not new. So it's exciting to know that there are organizations for us to kind of be a part of. So having you come tonight to share is great. And I'll make sure this presentation is recorded, and it will be available on our website, on the Ray Center's website, and we will share it with Tyler, so he'll be able to put it out there with his organization as well. So if there's any information, please be in touch with myself at the Ray Center or with Tyler Ray. I'm sure he'd be glad to get folks involved.
I just will write my email if anyone would like to just reach out. And also, there's our website.
Yeah, and any additional resources, Tyler, that you can think of, I can put along with your presentation on our site as well. So, thank you again so much for joining us this evening. And let's see. Oh, there's a message there, but we can take care of that. So,
Okay.
thank you,
Can I
Jada.
mess it up? GraniteOutdoor.org. That should work. But Google it. How about that?
Well,
Yeah, just to chime in, sorry, I went to your website to get the link to access this Zoom, and it just went to a Zoom general page, not the specific link. So I was able to access this through the Facebook link.
I'm
But
not sure.
I don't know if that might have caused any issues for anyone else. Just
Okay.
heads up.
thanks. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get this recorded
See,
information
we
out
need
to
more
folks.
funding so we can have more staffing so I don't screw it up. That's a big deal.
Right. Well, thank you again so much for sharing your information about the organization and this current and ongoing issue. So
Yeah, so thank you very much. And yeah, everyone get involved. It's a new world out there for us. So thanks for having me.
you got it. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Have a good night, everyone.